Hello viewers, and welcome yet again to another episode of Lunch Guide. I'm your host Chef Andy, and today we are going to be doing some very marvelous things. I'm going to be showing you a way around boneless pork. I'm also going to be showing you how to make a very simple garlic mash, and last but not least, a very simple garden salad. But before we get there, we'll begin by introducing the ingredients before us. So from the very front, we've got some apple cider vinegar, about 2 cloves of garlic, a teaspoon of cumin powder, and a teaspoon of paprika powder. You'll also require 2 teaspoons of unsalted butter, some white onion rings, and some salad dressing. You'll also require three peeled and washed potatoes, some lettuce to make your salad with, some cherry tomatoes for your salad. You'll also require 250 grams of pork that's already been brined in a mixture of water and vinegar. You'll require some salt for seasoning, some water to cook with, some oil to cook with as well, some peppercorns to crush, and last but not least, some milk. Now we're going to take a break now, allowing you to prepare yourselves for the show, and we'll catch you in a very short break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. If you're just catching up with us, we're right about to begin this very simple recipe. Now, in the bowl in front of me, I've got some pork ribs that were actually marinated, or rather pickled in some liquid. So the recipe to that particular pickling liquid is basically half part water to half part apple cider vinegar. You can also add about half part of red wine vinegar. It will actually do just the same thing. Allow that to rest overnight until nicely tendered out. And now we're going to proceed to add this to the oven and proceed to cook it very, very shortly. But before we do so, very handy, proceed to begin by draining your pickling liquid in a strainer. Allow the excess liquid to drain very briefly. And once done, you can proceed to discard the liquid. And we're going to proceed to prepare our baking tray. So you will require a baking tray for this dish. Proceed to grease your aluminum foil with some oil. And just using your fingertips, proceed to line the base with some oil. And next up, proceed to add your pork ribs, making sure to spread them out on your tray to allow for an even cooking. Alright, once that's on the tray, very simply proceed to season very lightly with some salt. Season as well with some black peppercorns. And now we're going to proceed to add that to a preheated oven. So this is set for 180 degrees. We're going to just slide those into the oven and set our timer for anywhere between 25 to half an hour and allow those to proceed to cook. Now while those are in there, we're also going to proceed to begin our mash. So I've already got a pot of water going on the side. Now for this you'll require just a sharp knife, and you will proceed to just cube your potatoes into quarters. Proceed to discard the liquid. And now very simply proceed to season your water with some salt. Remember, this is a particularly good stage to start to begin to season your water. Remember, the potatoes will season in there. And proceed to add your potatoes and allow to cook until soft and ready to mash. Now while that's in there, we're also going to proceed to prepare the ingredients for our salad. So we're going to start off very simply by slicing into half our cherry tomatoes. I'm going to use about 4 to 5 pieces of this, and you can reserve the rest. Proceed to add some seasoning to your bowl by beginning by crushing in some black peppercorns. Add in some salt as well. Add in your salad dressing. Now I'm using 1,000 Islands for this recipe. You can also alternatively make your own vinaigrette. It is just a matter of just seasoning your salad. And now proceed to add about 3/4 of your lettuce and your onion rings. And just to break the thickness of that dressing, just a small teaspoon of some apple cider vinegar. And using a spoon, proceed to mix all your ingredients in the bowl, making sure to toss as you proceed, allowing for all of your salad to get that beautiful coating. About a minute into your mixing, you can proceed to stop at this stage and allow your salad to sit in the refrigerator until the time you'll need to present this. So we're going to save that for a little later. And now while we await for our potatoes to cook and we allow for our pork ribs to cook also in the oven, we are going to take a very short break. But when we do come back, I will take you through the final process of finishing the mashed potatoes. I'll also show you a very simple way of finishing those beautiful pork ribs, and we're going to proceed to plating, and I'll give you also some very simple serving suggestions. But before we do so, we're going to take a break now, allowing yourselves to refresh, and we'll catch you after a very short break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are with us before we took the break, we had some pork in the oven, and this is now ready. We're just going to take this out quickly and allow this to cool off on our countertop. And we also have our potatoes already fully cooked, so we're going to proceed to empty out our pot with water into a strainer. And very, very simply proceed to add about 1/4 cup of milk to your pot. Proceed to also add a teaspoon of your unsalted butter. Now once your potatoes are drained completely, Proceed to give a little shake, and you can proceed to return those into your pot with the milk. And all you're going to do now is allow the milk to come to the boil, allow the butter to melt as well, and you can proceed to season very lightly with a bit of salt. Remember, this was previously salted when we boiled, so you only add a little bit just for seasoning, and of course some crushed black pepper. And the last ingredient for our mashed potatoes is garlic. Remember, it is garlic mash, so I'm going to be using this little piece of device. This is a garlic crusher. You can actually be able to find this at your retail stores. So this acts very, very simply. All you need to do is place your knob of garlic right on the inside, and while holding this right over your pot, just proceed to squeeze, and that should give you a nice mince right from the other end. And you can proceed to add your second piece of clove and squeeze that in as well. Now this beautiful addition of garlic will allow for you to really infuse your mashed potatoes. Also gives a nice beautiful fragrance to your dish. And now all you're going to proceed to do is begin to break down your potatoes with a masher. And once those big chunks are broken down, proceed to allow that to reduce very, very slowly. Now, in the meantime, we're going to proceed to debone our pork. So very, very simple technique of doing so. For this, you'll require just a simple fork and your tongs. And you can proceed to grab your pieces of pork one at a time, holding firmly with a fork from right in the middle, and very simply proceed to just very lightly twist the bone. You can also be able to do that by hand. Proceed to just try and channel that bone to twist very, very gently. And that may actually be a bit tough because the meat has actually reduced quite in size. So we're just going to proceed to do it the old-fashioned way. So I'm just going to use a sharp knife to just trim off the pork from the bone. And proceed to do so with the rest of your pieces. Now, by this particular point, you should actually have your pork very, very tender. It should actually come off the bone without any struggle. And just for record's sake, for those of you who are taking notes, that has been cooking for about 19 minutes to be exact. So just proceed to debone all your pieces. Proceed to do so to the very last piece. Of course, using your knife as your guide. And to the last and final piece. Proceed to finish that off. And you can at this stage proceed to discard your bones. And you can also move your tray out of the way at this stage. Now, just to bring your attention to the mash very briefly, your liquid is now completely evaporated, and your mash should actually be getting to its very creamy consistency. Now, once that's done, proceed to remove from the heat and allow to rest very, very briefly before you proceed to plate. But in the meantime, remember, we still do have our pork that's a little dry. And we're just going to finish that off very simply. So I'm just going to move our pieces of pork onto a side plate. Right, so simple as that. As I mentioned earlier, we are making some boneless pork. So very important to mention that the process of taking the bone should actually take effect as soon as the meat is cooked. Remember, this is one particular way of always reducing waste. Remember, meat that cooks on the bone will slide off the bone very, very gently after a bit of cooking in the oven. And it will also save you that extra trimming loss that you always get every time you try and debone your meat in advance. So for this particular recipe and for many of those other recipes that you may want to incorporate boneless meat, that's one very simple technique. Different techniques as well could be also cooking this in a pressure cooker. It will actually allow for the meat to fall off the bone very, very simply and allow for you to get a very, very beautiful consistency. So we're going to finish off our pork in a pan, beginning by adding, of course, some oil. Now to this we'll be incorporating some smoked paprika and some cumin powder. You will also require a small amount of vinegar just to cut the richness, and of course a bit of some barbecue sauce. So we're going to start off the process by adding our pork to the pan. Proceed to add a bit of some paprika powder and your cumin powder. Proceed to toss in the pan very, very briefly. And finish off by adding your barbecue sauce and just about half of your vinegar. And once that's beautifully coated, you can turn off your heat completely. Season lightly with some salt and crush in some black peppercorns. Toss once more, allowing for the sauce to really grasp the surface of your meat. And you can very simply now proceed to begin your plating process by first of all grabbing a plate. And I'm going to be using this very beautiful device that I like to use every now and then. It's basically just a mold for plating. And now we're going to begin the plating process by scooping our mash into the ring. And now this is now nice and fluffy. You should actually be able to just scoop it very simply with a spoon. And remember, one particular beautiful technique that is always handy, especially when making mashed potatoes: allow your milk and your butter to melt together, then proceed to mash. It will always give you a very beautiful consistency at the end. More of that nice, beautiful, fluffy texture. So once your mash is in the ring, just proceed to lift off completely. And we'll proceed to plate our pork right on the side. Of course, always trying to get a bit of height will always emphasize the beauty of the plate. Now just to finish off plating your pork. And last but not least, remember we did have a salad that we combined a little earlier in the show. And now this we're going to basically just move onto our plate with a separate pair of tongs. So very, very simple technique of plating. Begin by refreshing your salad by just lifting the salad leaves. Remember, we also had a bit of lettuce remaining. I like to reserve a bit of lettuce because it will always allow for you to soak up that excess bit of dressing in there. So we'll just begin by adding that in and just refresh your salad by mixing through. And once your salad or your salad lettuce is dressed, proceed to move that onto your plate, beginning with your lettuce leaves. Making sure, of course, to always plate from the center going up. And you can now proceed to add your cherry tomatoes on the side. Making sure to go right around, picking at least 4 or 5 corners around your salad. And proceed to go right around with your cherry tomatoes. And finish off by adding your onion rings. And just a bit of those cherry tomatoes right in between your onion rings. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my simple take on boneless pork with some garlic mash and a very simple garden salad. I hope you've managed to enjoy the show today and you've managed to pick up something new and fresh that you can also improvise in your very own home kitchens. But from the studio, we've come to the last and final stage of the show. I will remind you, for those of you who may have queries, questions, or any particular issues pertaining the show, you can always write back to us on our Facebook page, that's BrandPlus TV. And for those of you who may also want to recap on something you may have missed, or previous episodes to this show that you may not have managed to catch right on TV, you can always recap with those on our YouTube channel, which is also BrandPlus TV. There is plenty more for you to see. But from my end, I will thank you so much once more. And until the next episode, where we continue to bring you some beautiful dishes in our out and about theme for this particular season, I will bid you farewell. God bless and see you soon.